first virtual concert with the Washington Revels Jubilee Voices, who have performed at the Black History Museum before, and we are so pleased to have them back again today. Also, before we start, I would like to thank Colin Bills of the Washington Revels and Michelle Longo of the Office of Historic Alexandria for providing tech support for our call today, for our Zoom today, apologies. The Washington Revels Jubilee Voices, under the direction of Andrea Jones Blackford, is committed to the preservation of African American history and traditions, presenting songs and stories of struggle and perseverance, trials and triumphs, as expressed through a cappella music, drama, and dance. Inaugurated in 2010, the group now performs regularly at heritage sites throughout the Washington, D.C. area, singing, sharing, and learning the stories of people in those communities. Jubilee Voices presents a varied repertoire of music and spoken word, spanning the Civil War era to the Civil Rights Movement. Along with the music, Jubilee Voices also explores the poetry and writings of the period, along with first and third person portrayals of African Americans whose stories are a vital contribution to American history. Without further ado, it now gives me great pleasure to present the Washington Revels Jubilee Voices. Thank you.
Whole day, yonder comes day, day done broke into my soul. Yonder comes day, it's judgment day. Yonder comes day, it's judgment day. Yonder comes day, it's judgment day. Yonder comes day, day done broke into my soul. Yonder comes day, it's New Year's Day. Yonder comes day, it's New Year's Day. Yonder comes day, it's New Year's Day. Yonder comes day, day done broke into my soul. Yonder comes day, on my knees. Yonder comes day, on my knees. Yonder comes day, on my knees. Yonder comes day, day done broke into my soul. Yonder comes day, whole day. Yonder comes day, whole day. Yonder comes day, whole day. Yonder comes day, day done broke into my soul. Yonder comes day.
Hello, yonder come day. That was a psalm to welcome the day. We want to say welcome to you. We are the Washington Revels Jubilee Voices, and we are so happy to be with you here to celebrate Black History Month. We're also happy to be back with you in Alexandria. So today, through songs, we'd like to share the stories of the journey our ancestors made from Africa to America, from enslavement to freedom, and back to the future, and on into the future. Stories reflecting their trials, their toils, their moments of joy, and their times of pain. Our story begins with perhaps the most painful time of the year for a person bound by the chains of slavery. The first day of the year, hiring day, heartbreak day.
So long ago, so long ago, so long ago, so long ago.
The slave's New Year's Day. To the slave mother, New Year's Day comes laden with peculiar sorrows. She sits on her cold cabin floor, watching the children who may all be torn away from her the next morning. And often does she wish that she and they might die before the day dawns. On one of these sale days, I saw a mother lead 7 children to the auction block. She knew that some of them would be taken from her, but they took all. Before night, her children were all far away. I met that mother in the street, and her wild, haggard face lives today in my mind. She wrung her hands in anguish and exclaimed, "Gone, all gone. Why don't God kill me?" Harriet Jacobs.
Koti piti fili loye, zalongadu, zalongadu.
Those enslaved in the city of Alexandria knew the horrors of hiring day all too well, as in this city was located the country's largest slave trading company. But the desire for freedom overcame fears, and they often ran. They ran to avoid being sold deep into the South. They ran to stay united with their families. Their fear was real, palpable, and heartfelt, and made its way into their lullabies.
Our old master gonna tell us tomorrow, yes, yes. Our old master gonna tell us tomorrow, yes, my child, watch and pray. Our old master gonna tell us tomorrow, yes, yes. Our old master gonna tell us tomorrow, yes, my child, watch and pray. Our old master gonna tell us tomorrow, yes, yes. Our old master gonna tell us tomorrow, yeah, my child, watch and pray.
Those seekers of liberty brushed away fears and escaped, guided by soaring trees, stars shining in the heavens, the rushing sound of the river, and their faith. The woods became a sanctuary, and songs like this one held clues to freedom.
Steal away, steal away to Jesus.
Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. My Lord, He calls me. He calls me by the thunder. The trumpet sound within my soul. I ain't got long to stay here. Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. Green trees are bending, poor sinner sons are trembling. The trumpet songs within my soul. I ain't got long to stay here. Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away, steal away home. I ain't got long to stay
These weren't just holy songs. They carried secret messages to the enslaved, speaking not only of heaven, but of freedom and justice. Right now, we are going to sing one of those songs together. You may know it, Wade in the Water. So very quickly, I will teach you all the chorus to Wade in the Water. It's call and response, a traditional Black technique in singing. So I will sing the call and you will respond, God's gonna trouble the water. I will call again and you'll respond, God's gonna trouble the water. And then we'll go into the chorus, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. All right? So find your key, find your rhythm, find your spirit. Here we go. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Oh, see them children all dressed in red. God's gonna trouble the water. Well, they must be the children that Harriet led. God's gonna trouble the water. Oh, see them children all dressed in white. God's gonna trouble the water. If you try to take their freedom, they is willing to fight. God's gonna trouble the water. You know, you better wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Oh, see them children all dressed in black. God's gonna trouble the water. They done run away to freedom and they ain't coming back. God's gonna trouble the water. When I get to heaven, gonna sing and shout. God's gonna trouble the water. 'Cause there won't be any master who can put me out. God's gonna trouble the water. You know, you better wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. You know that God's gonna trouble the water. I tell you, God's gonna trouble the water.
They sought signs. Signs in the river, signs in the stars. Have you heard about the night the stars fell? Scientists, they called it the Leonid meteor storm of 1833. The ancestors, they saw it as a sign.
Somebody in the slave quarters started yelling in the middle of the night, "Come out to look up at the sky." We went outside and there they was, a-falling everywhere. Big stars coming down real close to the ground. And just before they hit that ground, they would burn up We was all scared. Some of the folks was screaming and some was praying. We all made so much noise, the white folks come out to see what was happening. They looked up and then they got scared too. But then the white folks started calling all the slave folk together for no reason. They started telling some of the slaves who their mamas and their daddies were and where they were sold off to. And we didn't know what to think of this. The old folks were so glad to hear where their peoples went. They made sure we all knew what happened. You see, white folks thought it was Judgment Day.
My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall. You'll hear the trumpet sound to wake the nations underground. Look into my God's right hand. When the stars begin to fall. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall. You hear the cinnamon to wake the nations underground. Oh, look into my God's right hand. When the stars begin to fall. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall. You'll hear the people shout to wake the nations underground. Look into my God's right hand. When the stars begin to fall. On my way to the promised land, I heard from heaven today. God's gonna give me his right hand. I heard from heaven today. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall. When the stars begin to fall.
The night the stars fell, a woman named Moses was inspired by its light. Sins were forgiven, fences mended.
It led a boy named Frederick out of despair and into history. A woman wove its story in the threads of a quilt. Enslaved folks on the plantation learned where their people went.
We remember them all. Gather and look up at the skies and see our loved ones on the stars.
In 1861 came war, and the following year, many of those escaping slavery found a safe haven in Alexandria, a city occupied by Union troops. The large numbers of the contrabands, as the freed men and women were officially known,
Glory, glory,
caused a humanitarian crisis in the city. They were destitute and arrived hungry and in ill health. Disease was rampant, and many, mostly women and children, died. Selfless volunteers, like the formerly enslaved Harriet Jacobs, came to the aid of the contrabands, and she wrote of her experiences. In time, the fortunes of the freed men and freed women began to improve.
Alexandria, March 18, 1863. Since I last wrote to you, the condition of the poor refugees has improved. During the winter months, the smallpox carried them off by hundreds, but now it has somewhat abated. Many have found employment and are supporting themselves and their families. It would do your heart good to talk with some of these people. They are quick, intelligent, and full of the spirit of freedom. Some of them say to me, the white men of the North have helped us thus far, and we want to help them. We would like to fight for them if they would treat us like men. Harriet Jacobs.
On January 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing enslaved people in the Confederate States. Just a few months later, he called for African American men to join the Union. By the end of the war, 1 out of every 8 Union soldiers was a Black man.
Hark, listen to the trumpeters, they call for volunteers. On Zion's bright and flowery mount, behold the officers.
They was talking in the cabin, they was talking in the hall. I listened, kind of curious, not to think about it all. On Sunday too, I noticed they was whispering mighty much, standing there around the roadside when they let us out of church. I didn't think air about it till the middle of the week when my last come to see me. But somehow he couldn't speak. Oh, then I see it in a minute what he come to see me for. They had listed colored soldiers, and my last grown to roar. Oh, I hugged him, I kissed him, I begged him not to go. But he told me that his conscience was calling him. He couldn't bear to linger when he had a chance to fight for the freedom they give him and the glory of the right. So I hugged him and kissed him, and I promised to be true. And he put a knapsack on him and a coat all colored blue. So I gave him Pap's old Bible from the bottom of the drawer when they listed colored soldiers, and my last were on the wall.
We look like men, we look like men, we look like men of war, all armed and dressed in uniform, we look like men of war.
We want no cowards in our band that will their colors fly. We call for valiant-hearted men who are not afraid to die.
We look like men, we look like men, we look like men of war. All armed and dressed in uniform, we look like men of war. It sets my heart quite in a flame, a soldier thus to be. I will enlist, gird on my arms, and fight for liberty. We look like men, we look like men, we look like men of war. All armed and dressed in uniform, we look like men of war.
After the war, African Americans reveled in the joys of freedom and the hope of self-determination. They built communities that provided shelter and support from a world that would not see them as equals. Since the early 19th century, neighborhoods like the Bottoms, Haiti, the Hill, the Hump, Cross Canal, Colored Rosemont, the Fort, Seminary, Parker Gray, Uptown, the Burg, and Fishtown shaped Alexandria. Residents of these Black enclaves built schools and churches that became the heart of the community, and every Sunday they gathered to sing songs of thanksgiving, freedom, and praise. For no matter how uncertain the future, they knew their lives had been changed forever.
I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. You know the angels in the heaven done sign my name. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. You know the angels in the heaven done sign my name. If you don't believe I've been redeemed, you know the angels in heaven done sign my name. Just follow me down to Jordan's chilling stream. You know the angels in heaven done sign my name. You know I stepped in the water was cold. You know the angels in heaven done sign my name. Well, it chilled my body, but it didn't touch my soul. You know the angels in heaven done sign my name. I know I've been changed. Yes, I've been changed. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. You know the angels in heaven done sign my name. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. You know the angels in heaven done sign my name. You know the angels in heaven done sign my name. You know the angels in heaven done sign my name. So glad the angels in heaven done, sign my name.
After emancipation, the messages and songs of freedom passed down from whispers in hush harbors into the churches and schools of those communities, and folks sang, marched, and fought for freedom. From 1864, when United States colored troops fought and won the right to have their dead comrades buried with military honors, the spirit of Black activism has lived in Alexandria. Building on the soldiers' example, in 1939, a group of young men walked into the library on Queen Street to protest segregation, one of the nation's first sit-in protests, and the legacy continued. Through the years, across the nation, freedom sounds and stories reverberated from rafters, in town halls, in buses filled with freedom riders heading south, on college campuses and city streets. The songs and the protests traveled north, south, around the world to inspire those seeking justice around the world and those folks who take on the fight today. Through it all, we honor the ancestors, our ancestors, who toiled so we might rest, who sacrificed so we may have abundance, who bore the lash so we may remain unmarked, and gave us life by laying down their own. Because of them, we are. They reminded the world, as we must do, that all men and women are created equal.
May the torch of freedom carried by those souls be passed to us. May that torch light our path as we fight for all people to be free, and that all people live in an equitable society. As civil rights movement activist Ella Baker said, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it happens." We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it happens. Now, what I would like for you to do is to join with me in a song called "We Shall Not Be Moved." Now, some of y'all know this, some of y'all do not. And what I want to do is teach everybody to sing with me, "We Shall Not Be Moved." The song has the chorus of we shall not be moved. Like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved. There are two verses of scripture that are the foundation of this song, like a tree that's planted by water. So when you sing this song, I want you to think of yourself as a tree planted on the bank, and just think about how deep and rich the roots of that tree sit. Because that's how we are. This is the song, and we're going to sing it together. Just sing "We Shall Not Be Moved" with me. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Next verse. Fighting for our freedom, we shall not be moved. Fighting for our freedom, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Black and white together, we shall not be moved. Black and white together, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Young and old together, we shall not be moved. Young and old together, Father, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. When my burden's heavy, we shall not be moved. When my burden's heavy, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Don't let that world deceive you. We shall not be moved. Don't let that world deceive you. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We're fighting for our children. Fighting for our children. We shall not be moved. Fighting for our children. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not. We shall not. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
So, thank you for joining us today. And many thanks to Audrey Davis and the Alexandria Black History Museum for being such generous hosts. And now, in the spirit of our ancestors, we're going to end with a song that reflects the new world that they made for us and the world that we are fighting to leave to future generations. So we ask you to join us in our final song, In That Great Getting Up Morning. And so you're warmed up by now. David talked to you about call and response, as well as Arthuretta. You did some hand clapping, and so you've got your rhythm down. So you need to pull all that together in this final song. So again, it is call and response. The lead will be singing In That Great Getting Up Morning, and all the responders have to sing is fare you well, fare you well. Or you can decide you want to do the lead and call. You know, by all means do that. You can sing it, just pick a chord and sing it. You can sing it out of tune, you know, as long as you sing it with vigor. In that great getting up morning, there's a better day coming.
Fare you well, fare you well.
There's a better day coming.
Fare you well, fare you well.
When I see King Jesus.
Fare you well, fare you well.
When I see King Jesus.
Fare you well, fare you well.
Oh,
when that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well.
There'll be no more crying.
Fare you well, fare you well.
There'll be no more crying.
Fare you well, fare you well.
There'll be no more dying.
Fare you well, fare you well.
There will be no more dying.
Oh, in that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well.
Oh,
in that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. Oh, in that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well.
oh, the saints will be arising.
Fare you well, fare you well.
Oh, the saints will be arising. There'll be no more striving. There will be no more striving.
Fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. Oh, in that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well.
In
In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. Oh, in that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. Oh, in that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. Oh, fare you well, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well, fare you well. In that great getting up morning, fare you well.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was such a wonderful concert. I want to thank the Revels Jubilee Voices. If you have questions, please place them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. They would love to hear from you. I know when Gregory was saying, please sing along, even if you're singing out of tune, I was definitely singing out of tune, but I was singing along, so I was enjoying myself. So I wanted to ask a question, and you in the concert today, one of my favorite pieces that you do was playing, and when we dedicated the Freedman Cemetery in 2014, and in our exhibit in the museum, we had on a loop music by the Jubilee Voices, but my favorite piece was the one about they listed colored soldiers, and I was wondering if anyone from the group could provide a little bit of background about that song, because I think it's just such a moving piece.
Sure. I have a little background, and I know at least one other group member that can add on to it. The song was sung while recruiting Black men to fight for the in Benedict, Maryland, and they eventually became part of the 9th Regiment that fought at the Battle of the Crater. But it was called the Negro Battle Hymn because it embodied what frightened the Confederates most of all, giving Black men a uniform, a cause to fight for, and a gun. And it was amazing. There are accounts of how amazing this song sounded when you had the full regiment singing it. And these men, they fought bravely. And if you read about the Battle of the Crater, many of them sacrificed their lives. So it's a song that's near and dear to all of us because it embodies that idea of giving dignity to somebody who had not been given dignity, and the amazing concept of somebody fighting for a country that had enslaved and put them down.
And that's what I always think is such an amazing part of the United States colored troops. And I always think about Peter Washington, who is in our Gladwin record, or the book of records about who are buried at the contraband. And he's the man we know the least about. Mm-hmm. And we have that Harriet Jacobs letter who ended up going to his funeral. And mm-hmm. when she talks about the fact that he was ministering to the contraband and he had lost everybody in his family. He'd lost his daughters, his granddaughter, his wife. He was here in Alexandria by himself, and his two sons were fighting for the United States colored troops. And she ends the letter that they're fighting for a country that persecuted them, but they gave their all for the country. And even at his death, he didn't know if his two sons were alive. So always makes me think of that. And it's such a moving song. Another question that I had for the Jubilee Voices, for any member of the group to answer, what has been the most moving experience coming out of a performance?
I can speak to one that still resonates with me. It was a couple of years ago, we did a concert at Arlington House, the home of Robert E. Lee. And so that day for the event organized by the Park Service, there was a reenactment of a wedding that took place among two of the enslaved individuals who were enslaved at Arlington House, you know, on the Lee staff. And the people doing that reenactment were descendants of the man and the woman who had been married that day. And so there was that was just kind of almost surreal, but just the fact that here we are, this group singing songs of freedom, and we're standing on, and after this wedding, we stood on the portico of the mansion. And there we are singing these songs of freedom at Robert E. Lee's old house, and we're looking out over the city of Washington. And there was all sorts of creepy feelings that, you know, were with me on that day, and then describing it, I mean, the chills are running up my spine right now. So, and I'm sure some of the other members of the group have some other things they want to share.
One for me was when we sang on Capitol Hill, and we had just introduced the story of the Pearl, the slave runaway. And at the end of that, we realized that they were descendants from that actual place there. And we got to talk to them and take pictures with them outside. So that was really memorial for me.
Both of those sound great. And Arthuretta, did you have?
Yeah, I wanted to, actually the Pearl was the one for me as well, because I did the story. I told the story of the sisters, whose statues, by the way, are sitting right there in Alexandria. And it was unlike the Lee experience, which was also very moving. This was not scripted. They were just led to that church in DC. And we told the story, and then they didn't tell us that they were descendants until after we did the performance. So it was very spiritual. It was very tranquil. It was as if the ancestors were actually present and thanking us for keeping their story alive. So that was absolutely one of my most moving experiences with Jubilee Voices.
And just in case people don't know the story of the Pearl, Arthuretta, why don't you just describe that story of the Pearl?
Well, you all help me with this because y'all know my memory is not the best, but the name of the two sisters.
Yes, Mary and Emily Edmondson.
Edmondson, yes. Okay, back once upon a time, before the big slave revolts, there was a time when most of the indentured servants were house servants, and they were for a lot of the aristocrats in DC. They decided they did not want to be enslaved anymore, and they arranged to go on a barger, which was called a Pearl, to escape. And there's a whole lot to this story, but the Edmondson sisters were two who decided they would go, notwithstanding what their mother and father wished for them. They wound up going, they wound up getting caught, and there's a whole lot more to that story. And one day we're going to come right back to this museum and tell the whole thing. But in the meantime, I recommend you go downtown, take a look at their statues, do some research for them. And the beautiful thing is that Andrea has put music, as she did here, she puts music to the story. So as we tell the story, we sing the songs and brings the history alive. And it's a beautiful experience, both for those of us who share it and for the audiences that have that get to hear it.
And the Pearl was the name of the ship that the sisters and others were trying to flee on.
Yes.
And everything was great, but there was one brother who was trying to talk to one of the sisters, and she wasn't paying attention to him, so he told.
Well, what Greg means is not actual brother. He wasn't
no, not actual.
He was one of those folk that have to tell.
Yes.
Because he felt slighted. And I think Greg liked that part because that was the part that really catches you. Yeah. But we're telling the story now, which I'm trying not to do. So take up too much time.
I will say one thing. On Facebook, I ran into one of this poor man. His name was Judson Diggs. descendants, and found out from her that that family was one of the families that had received recompense from Georgetown University because their ancestors were sold.
Wow.
There, so she's got a free education. So Judson Diggs may have done something that wasn't cool, allegedly, but think of the situations all of us were, our ancestors were in at that time. And things do come to right eventually.
And just so you all know, Arthuretta is a professional storyteller in her other life, if you haven't guessed that.
She's a great storyteller, and I encourage you to come by and see the sculpture in Alexandria of the Edmondson sisters on Duke Street. You'll find it in near the African American Heritage Park. And if you're interested in a book on the Pearl, Escape on the Pearl by Mary Kay Ricks is a good book to read. You can also just Google the Pearl, and you'll find some other articles and more information on the two sisters. We had a question relating to the story about the wedding at Arlington House. Was the reenacted wedding at Arlington House Selena Gray's?
Yes, I believe it was.
Great, thank you. And I have another question. Let me just find it here.
Excuse me, but I thought it was this. I thought it was the Syphaxes, though.
No, I think it was Selena Gray, but those families were both in the area at the time and at Arlington House, and their story is incredible too. Very, very incredible. And I would urge anybody to visit Arlington House if you're able to do that, or to even look up, like Audrey suggested, look up and find more. The wonderful thing about living in this area is we have a lot of well-documented history, and the stories are amazing. I mean, they're just amazing, looking up how these generations of families survived, and they survived to this day using simple tools like passing along music and stories and keeping that history alive. So do your part in keeping the history alive by, doing some research on the Syphaxes and the Grays and learn more. That's one of the things we like doing with Jubilee Voices. We like to spur people on to learn more and to share this information with others, so these people, their lives and their stories stay alive.
Absolutely, and share stories with your family this evening. If you're inspired by this concert and the Revels performance, share those stories this evening and book the Revels for a performance, because they are truly wonderful and terrific. And then also, speaking to what Andrea said, if you Google the Washington Post, there is a recent story about a recently uncovered photo of Selena Gray a couple of years ago, and we actually have used it in our exhibit here. So history is always being uncovered. So that's what I love about what we do, what you do. There's always new history coming to the forefront, and it adds to our stories. It adds to our interpretation of the history. And then we have a question from a listener. Can anyone in the group talk about June singing at the Archives commemoration of the Emancipation Proclamation with the issuance of the stamp?
So this was another one of those moments that stands out. So we were singing at the National Archives on the night that the country was marking the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And one of our late members, June, who you heard in the virtual choir singing "I Know I've Been Changed," was there. And it was just one of those amazing evenings. There were, everybody from Congress, let me just say that, every Democratic member from Congress was there practically. And Andrea, it's okay, but that's the truth, and they were all there.
Greg, excuse me, but it was actually in the morning after that.
The night before we did a watch night.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But June sang in the morning.
Oh, okay. All right. All right, Jim, do you want to continue that? My memory fails me then.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do have a very good memory. except for the side. I wasn't there at the wedding at Arlington House, but
Okay.
Syphaxes are famous.
All these things are running together. So we did these two.
No, you're right. It was a wonderful, wonderful evening the night before. In fact, it's the most wonderful New Year's Eve celebration I've ever experienced. Harriet Tubman appeared we had the countdown with Harriet going into New Year's, and my sister, who's deceased, who was in her 90s, and I'm going to be 90 in April, was ecstatic. And then we came back in the morning where the Postal Service had this commemoration or introduction of the stamp. And we entered into it with June singing, "Oh Lord, I know I've been changed." And it was actually recorded. It was actually part of the evening news. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
There was a funny story connected with that. It wasn't meant to happen like that. We were supposed to be background music while people waited to view the Emancipation Proclamation document. They were letting people in at a time so they could view it, and we were just supposed to quietly sit down and stand up and sing as they were doing this. Well, what happened was there were reporters there from CNN and other places, and Mama June, as we love to call her, she had gotten a direction confused, and I said, "Why stand up, go and just sing?" And she started going down the aisle of this area we were in, saying, "Lord, I know I've been changed." And the CNN reporters were like, "Who's that? That's not in the script. Wait." And our artistic director happened to be there, and she said, "Oh, Washington Revels Jubilee Voices, they're wonderful." And that's how we ended up on the Situation Room. So if you go to YouTube and put in Emancipation Proclamation 150 Situation Room, you'll get to see what happened. She gave a beautiful, beautiful performance of that song, and that became her signature song. And we're forever indebted to June. She was a gospel singer who performed throughout the DC area, and she joined Jubilee Voices and loved it because she wanted to tell the stories to other people. In fact, her last gig with us, she was very dedicated to children. She came out of her bed sick and performed for a school, Oakwood School, and because she wanted to talk to the babies. And then she died a few months later. But she was an amazing woman. This is an amazing song. And that, again, I ascribe that to the ancestors of at work wanting to get their message out about who they are, who they were, who we are, and how we help make American history.
Thank you. And thank you for mentioning her because she had a powerful voice. It was a truly, truly powerful voice. Very, very beautiful. And as we close out, just one last question. In light of the events that happened last year in May, and as professional singers, and have you been seeing music being used in a new way? Because I've noticed it in protests that I would see on TV, and I think music is now more important than ever, and especially in these times. So is there anything you'd like to say to speak to that?
I think Jim can speak to that.
I will say that one of the things that Revels also does is the daily antidote of songs. And tomorrow we will be performing at noon on the daily antidote of songs. And that has gone viral. People listen all over the United States. And there is one family from the UK, from the United Kingdom, from Canada. And tomorrow we will be performing. But this will be ending their celebration of Black History Month and our continuing seeking for social justice. And we're ending that series tomorrow at noon. So I urge anyone who is interested to come and join us tomorrow. But music, yes, is as a way of bringing everyone together, particularly at this time when we're so separated by the pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank the Washington Revels Jubilee Voices under the direction of Andrea Jones Blackford. I want to thank you for a wonderful performance. We would love to have you back again. And I hope that we can all be together in person
Yes.
very soon. And I wish everyone health and safety. And many, many thanks again. And these sessions are being, this session was, concert was recorded and will be on the Revels website and also the Office of Historic Alexandria website as well. So thank you again. Everyone have a great weekend. Many thanks. Take care.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burdens down, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, I feel like shouting, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, said I feel like shouting, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down.
Hi, my name is James Harkless. I sing baritone in the Jubilee Voices. And I actually joined the Washington Revels in 1986. In thinking about what we have accomplished and about this celebration, the thought occurred to me that actually, unconsciously, for the last 10 years, what Jubilee Voices has been doing for its audiences is proclaiming that Black Lives Matter.